It's probably an understatement to say it's crunch time now and decision time. I've just had a look at some of the stats. 552 points to the Bulls, 485 to Benetton in terms of points.
Yeah.
But the rest of the stats more or less the same type of game that you guys play.
Well, also to be fair, I mean they are international team.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of those guys play for Italy and done really well against Ireland, did really well against England, you know. So, and they're seasoned internationals. So it doesn't surprise me what you say, Simon, that a lot of their game is very good. You know, I mean, you can read into the success of their line-out, success of their scrum, you know, their transition in terms of scoring tries from turnover. I mean, they beat the Sharks last weekend in Durban, and you know, and they beat the Sharks team with a good team, not a makeshift team. So, you know, they're not like people think it's an Italian team, and therefore in the old days Italian teams were, you know, probably the weakest in the group. I mean, they definitely deserve to be in the top 8 as they are now. And so we're not taking them lightly. And don't forget, they beat us in the Rainbow Cup final a couple of years ago when people thought we'd just go over there and beat them. So they have improved. They've signed some really good players. Their coaching staff has assembled quite a really good squad. And Marku, you know, has been touted, Bartolomé has been touted to be an international coach for Italy in the future. So, you know, there's no reason why, you know, we're going to underestimate them.
Speaking of Italy as an international team, it's my perception that Italy has taken something from the World Cup and has improved. And is it fair to say that that has sort of whittled down to their club size?
Well, their core group is the Benetton team. And you can imagine if you're doing so well in international level and you're holding great international sides like they did in the Six Nations, the belief that you would get playing in a domestic competition or in a non-international competition, I'm talking about with international players, must give you a massive boost. So if they think they can compete against England with a group of those players, and they can compete against Ireland with a group of those players, there's no reason why when they play against clubs that they don't feel that they can do well, and they've done well. I mean, their season's been good. You know, they've lost 1 or 2 games narrowly, and they've beaten some big sides this year as well. And they want to make the playoffs, I'm sure. You know, they're there in the top 8. They also know, I think they've got Edinburgh next game, and they've got us. So there's, you know, to start what you asked me earlier, you know, understatement, this is massive weekend. There's so many permutations this weekend. I think by this time next week, you'll have an understanding about who's going to be where. But this weekend there's so many permutations that, you know, we could win today and still only be able to finish 4th. We could win today. We could win tomorrow, and the permutations could be that if we win the next game, we come 1st. So there's so many, and I'm sure it's the same for the teams 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's what's so nice about this competition. It basically goes down to the second last weekend, and even sometimes last weekend, to see who plays in the knockout stages.
Last one from me. Positional play. You've got Goose back, and you've got Chris Smith on the bench. I'll have to admit, I was having my doubts with Chris Smith as part of the season. You must be chuffed that you have Goose with you, and you've got Chris Smith.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I think, to be fair, I mean, he's not flashy, and people know that, but he does his job, you know. He's got an unbelievable kicking success rate off the tee. He's been around with us for 4 seasons, so he understands how we want to play. And, you know, we know that Goosen, when he's on fire, he's one of the best players in the comp. In fact, in all the stats, when you do the stats off the player stats and the proper analysis systems, he's one of our highly rated players in terms of his contributions he gives to the team. So it's wonderful that Goosen can come back in. We know what he offers us. And it's so nice to know that a guy like Chris, who's got a lot of confidence the last couple of weeks, is also on the bench or in the periphery, that he can come on at any time. You know, I know coaches will always tell you this, Simon, you want to have competition for the jersey. And it's nice to know that, you know, you've got players fighting for that jersey. But a guy like Johannes Kirsten hasn't had much game time because Ulrich and Ruan Vermaak are playing well at 4 and 7. You know, you've got Nazam and Kumedi who, Gumedi's invited to the alignment camps with the Springboks, not in our group, but that's because Cameron's playing well, and Nizam played really well off the bench. So what it does, it creates competition, and it creates a healthy environment for us to actually be able to put our team on the field.
Jake, will 80-minute performance obviously be high priority tomorrow?
Yeah, Kubis, I was thinking, and obviously I've worked through all these things, the 2 points that Glasgow got and the last point they got, it's basically irrelevant if they win tomorrow. I mean, that's the reality. They got zebra in the last week, and again, I'm not doing it in any disrespectful way, but you would fancy that they would beat zebra in the last weekend. So, whether they got 1 point, no points, 2 points last week, the destiny of where they're going to end up is on their result tomorrow. And so, I think there's a lot have been made out, and quite rightly so, that we took our foot off the gas. We probably let them in. We probably were a little bit sloppy. We probably got seduced by the fact that we thought it was going to be easy at the end after being 37-10 up. But, that result after tomorrow will either have been hell of important or immaterial. What is important, as you quite rightly say, is that we play as well as we did for those 58 minutes throughout every game going forward now. Because as the competition gets to the playoff stages and the top 8 teams are competing, if you're not on song for 80 minutes, you could lose. We could quite easily have lost last week if we hadn't taken that penalty and kicked it over from 55 meters. So it just shows you, And again, that's because they got international players. Let's not underestimate the fact that Glasgow, almost in every position on the field, they had an international player who's played recently in international rugby, and that's what we got to learn. We play Munster again with all internationals, or Leinster again with all internationals, or Benetton with all the internationals. We're going to have to make sure that we understand that we're competing against an international laden group of players.
You've said in the past that you need to play your best rugby at this stage of any competition.
Yeah.
Looking at that first 60 minutes last Saturday, how far was the Bulls from
Well, that was close. That was close. To get Glasgow 37-10 after 58 minutes, you're talking about, it doesn't matter, yes, there's altitude, and yes, you're talking about a dominant performance where, to be fair, 37-10 could have been 40-something 10 because we took the 2 3-pointers as opposed to going to the corner. Now, I know what I told you after that. If you'd gone to the corner and not scored, people have said, why didn't you take the 3? But we were so dominant that even, I'm thinking that if we had scored one more try there, then the game could have been 40-something 10 by that stage. And that is as close to, and I wouldn't say perfect, but that is close to as good as it gets when you play a team like Glasgow and you're 40 points to 10 up after 60 minutes. So, it's simple. I know I tell you something which is obvious. The best 3 games you've got to play are the last 3. And they've got to make sure it's final, semis and quarterfinal. Those are the best 3 games you've got to play. You can't play your best 3 games when you're out of the competition, because that's meaningless. You want to play in the last 3 and you want to play your best rugby. And that was in the 60 minutes. There were times that it was outstanding. Standing with the forwards, outstanding with the backs. Set piece was really strong. I don't think we even looked like losing a line-out against a really good Glasgow line-out. It's I suppose I'm putting everything together. What am I going to take into this game? Those 60 minutes is going to be the benchmark of how we want to finish, for 80 minutes.
Jake, I'm going to ask you about the other 20 minutes.
Yes.
That game against Glasgow, it's a template that we've seen a fair bit here at Loftus. I think because similar thing with Leon, teams do come back at you guys.
Yes.
And it obviously looks like a bit of a pattern. So my question is, how do you look at it? Do you look at it as a lack of balance in terms of efficacy between attack and defense, or do you look at it as a lack of control after you've
it's a good question. It's a good question. I'll tell you, it's a good question, because those are the things the coaches go through. So things that come to mind is, we've won the game, and whether we like it or not, 37-10 with 20 to go, players would think they've won the game. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, we're probably not as ruthless as we should be in stopping them from getting points when you've almost won the game. And that's not us. That's just how rugby is. I've got no doubt that our bench is still got lots to grow in terms of experience, in terms of understanding situations in the game. We spoke about it. You can't just sit on the bench and just watch the game like a spectator. you almost have to work out in your head when you go on what is needed from you as a bench player. And I don't think we're smart enough yet. And again, no attack on any individual. I don't think we're smart enough yet to understand what is needed from the bench in the last 20 or 30 minutes of a game, because that varies. Some games you need to chase, some games you need to slow down, some games you need to get a balance between playing with the forwards and not the backs. Some games you need to play with the backs because you can see that the backs are. So we're not quite there yet, and that's part of what we're trying to grow as a coaching staff and as a group. And then also, teams have been smart about using altitude. So it looks like they get stronger at the end, but they're very, very slow in the beginning. And that's not something that goes unnoticed, because if teams are slowing it up, every time the whistle goes, someone's injured. There's a positive and negative to that. One is they can control the game not getting away from them, but the other thing is they run out of time. So I'm sure those coaches would be going home and going, you know what, if we had started well and if we had sped it up quickly, maybe, who knows, we could have won that game. Because let's be fair, the only thing that stopped Glasgow from winning, and I'm not saying was time. I mean, they ran out of time, and that was because there were so many stoppages in the first 25 minutes. So, but those are things, again, so you can't always control. Those are things where the referee will say, I've seen it. There was a time there where Marco went to him and said, I'm using an example because we analysed this, and he said, ref, please, man, they're slowing it up. And it was the same time that Ruan Nokia was changing his boots. Now he said, listen, it's very hard for me to say anything if your captain needs new boots. And he was right. But again, it just shows you sometimes through circumstance, the game can get to a tempo or to an intensity where the overseas sides have been able to control it. It's a bit like playing with the wind and against the wind in a really gusty stadium. It's like, you play cricket and you lose the toss on a wet wicket, you end up losing the test match. And rugby is the same. You can either strategize in a certain way, but sometimes that strategy also either backfires or it works for you. And I'm going to answer what you're saying. We have been caught a few times, but we've managed to win most of those games. So in some ways, maybe the blueprint isn't that bad.
Coach, I pick up that there's not too much rotation. I understand probably at this stage of the season, you want to have as much continuity as possible. But with those few changes that you do make, those little rotations, what influences those changes? Is it a matter of just freshening up the pack, or is it something that you expect for the particular guys that you're bringing for the particular game?
Okay. There's a wonderful story. When I was a teacher, I went to speak to a guy called Skonk Nicholson, who coached Maritzburg College for many, many years. And in those years, Maritzburg College, even today, Maritzburg College, but those years when I was a young school teacher, they used to be a very dominant rugby school. And I asked him one day, I said, Skonk, what do you do? What do you give me some of your tips that you do when you pick your first team and how you get the results you get? And he said to me that all the kids at break time, like they all do in all schools, they run down to the notice board to see what the team's going to be like for the weekend. And obviously all the kids talk about wie's in die eerste span, or who's in the first team. And he says, now and then what you do, Jake, is out of nowhere, you just leave one of the stars out. You just leave his name off and put him in the second team. And he said what tends to happen is everyone in the squad thinks, geez, today, if he leaves that kid out, then I might be next. Okay, now I'm not saying that's what I do, but I think that one of the things you have to try and create is a player should never get to the notice board every week and think his name's always going to be on the sheet. And that comes with rotation, that comes with giving guys that are working hard at training hope, and it also creates a situation where players play every week think, well, if he changes two next week might mean it's me. But obviously, Skonk also said, make sure that when you leave that star out, it's a game you know you're going to win. So I haven't forgotten that either.
And there's also, obviously last week, not many were expecting Benetton to beat the shots team that's in a bit of rhythm with the European exploits. I don't know if you had a chance to watch that game back. If you did,
The Sharks, Benetton game.
Yes, if
Yeah,
you
5
did,
times.
what did you pick up that they did right in that particular game? And did that result in any way change
Yeah.
the way that you would
Yeah.
approach this?
No, look, I mean, we don't just analyse one game of the Benetton have been really good this whole year. I mean, they played Gloucester in that semi-final. They could quite easily have been in the final in Gloucester's place. They would be playing Sharks again, which would be quite, would have been quite a good fixture anyway, because you can see it was a really tight encounter. So yeah, there was nothing. What we picked up is that they don't go away. I mean, they scored in the 70-something minute. Their bench is strong. They've got international players on their bench, and they do the little things well. I mean, because of the fact they got quite a lot of experience in their group, and they, Marco Bortolami and Fabio Ngaro, that are friends of mine that are coaching there. I spend a lot of time with them. In fact, I probably see them today and go out with them and chat to them. They've done well. Guys, signings like Ila Snyman and Umaga at 10, and they've done well with the recruitment that they've done. They've sort of complemented what they've needed from outside into the Italian setup. So there's nothing we watched and thought, there's the code or the secret recipe. They're a good team. We're going to have to play well. Last year we played them, if you remember, we gave them almost a 16-point start. And then we got a wake-up call and we had to catch up. So there's no reason why we're going to go into this game, and I say it again, just thinking that we're going to just go through the motions.
I think lastly, just could be, essentially is in the regular season, you lost home game.
Yes.
And Loftus, you managed to make it a fortress, losing just once, not a disgrace against the defending champions of the tournament master. How pleased are you with the home form and making sure that it's tough for opposition teams to come to Loftus?
I think every team in any competition wants to make sure that when you play at home, you have an advantage. And the advantage either is the supporters that come, or it's the fact that you can make it difficult for teams to beat you at your home ground. And we've managed to do that not only this season, for the last 4 years. I don't know what our win record would be at home, but I would think it's probably in the 80s or high 80s. And that in itself tells you that it's difficult to win. I read an article where Umaga said, it's difficult to go to Loftus and win, and that's right. As it is difficult to go to Thornton Park and beat Munster in Munster, as it is difficult to go to Dublin and beat them at the Aviva Stadium, beat Leinster in the Aviva Stadium. So, I think the top teams all try and make it difficult and try and get a record where you don't lose at home. Munster, we lost to the champions. We lost with 14 men. We lost in a situation where that game could quite easily have gone the other way. No red card, tries allowed. We would have been 29-11 up, and then all of a sudden things are a little bit different. But I say it again, losing to Munster was massive for us, because if you look at the log now, we probably would have been first. But we still have an opportunity, if things go the way they should go and could go, to finish first or second anyway. So who knows? Maybe we still get the chance to play at home a lot more than people expected us to, 5, 6, 7 weeks ago.
Jake, tongue in cheek, is your spectacle going to be overshadowed by what happens across the road this weekend?
It's not tongue in cheek. It's, I'm probably going to wear red with a lion on my chest this weekend, Oh, you mean, the office? I thought you meant the Lions versus Glasgow.
No. Literally across the road.
Oh no, I must say it again, being a teacher, Heinz, I would love for them to have played as a curtain raiser. Like when I was a kid and I was a schoolmaster, to play at Ellis Park. I remember playing at Ellis Park as a schoolboy, or coaching a JP side, playing at Ellis Park. It was an incredible experience for all those kids. I understand now why they don't do it. It's a home game. Some coaches feel that not playing at Office is a disadvantage. Some coaches would feel, and I'm using Office Grey as an example, that if you played here, Grey would be more comfortable than playing there. So, but I think I would love to get to a point where every big derby game in Pretoria, we invite those schools to come and play the first 15s in our stadium, on our field, and change in our change room. I mean, I don't know why that's changed. As a youngster, just walking into Ellis Park and just sitting in a change room, even if it was change room 10, was an incredible experience, And so, it's not going to overshadow anything. They're talking about two really good schoolboy sides. It's the only country, I still say to people, I can't believe it. Every Sunday you read in the paper, Garcies wen vir Waterkloof, and Waterkloof wen vir, you know, I mean, I don't think there's any other country, well, no, there's no other country in the world that I've ever been in where I can tell you who won versus Lichtenberg and Ben Viljoen, you know. And I can tell you there's a derby day that's in Marensky More, you know what I mean? And it's wonderful. I mean, but I go back to what I think. I really wish that we could play these big derby games that, for the kids' sake, played on a stadium like Loftus, because I think we take away something from. Some kids would never ever play a game at Loftus. You know, who knows what it would mean to him to play a game, Grey Office on Loftus Versveld, you know. And conversely, when we go to Bloem, then maybe they must play at the Free State Stadium when Grey College hosts them in Free State, you know. So you're right. It's not tongue in cheek. I mean, I think it's fantastic, but it would be first prize if we had, you know, we had those guys coming to play at our stadium.
Okay. Jake, just on player management, heading towards the end of the season now, are you in a position where you can play your best 15 every week, or are there still some sort of rotation or player management issues that you need to look after?
So Ken, I want to quickly just give you 2 minutes feedback. So there's an arbitration case going on now about rotation, and I'm talking about where the players can play, how much they can play, all that sort of stuff. You're all aware of that. We're very, very far ahead in terms of all the players who are going to play from now until the end of the Currie Cup have been given their obligatory 8 weeks off. So we're in a very good situation in that whoever is required to play, whether he plays in the playoff games now, because he's had his 8 weeks and continues into the Currie Cup, or he doesn't play in the playoff games and then is eligible for Currie Cup, we've ticked that box. So whether they say you have to give 8 weeks or whether they say let's can it, we're in that situation. I suppose in summary to where we are as a URC team, we now need to put the best team on the field to win the game in the next 5 fixtures. And we're very fortunate that we have everyone almost ready and available. The only guy I would think that is probably missing is Marcel. Other than that, every other player has had his leave, is available, is physically fit. So we can actually, in the next, as I said, next 5 fixtures of URC, pick, barring injury, the best possible 23 every Saturday.
Jake, just on Benetton, I'm guessing that sort of team, just in terms of their discipline, any coach would love to have. I mean, their penalty count against them was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, 2 penalties last week.
That's shots.
Yeah.
Unheard of.
Either that or must get that ref.
Yeah. How do you deal with it?
No, well, I mean, credit to them. That's what all coaches try and do. Coaches that are involved in any form of rugby would say we try and give less than 10 penalties a game. I mean, under 10 is considered a good outing because you're gonna get some reads wrong. You're gonna get, sometimes you're gonna make 1 or 2 mistakes. You knock the ball on forward and you're offsides or whatever. But that is one thing that they've, again, as I said to you earlier, Ken, they well coached. The guys have been around for a while. Their recruitment's good, and they're difficult side. They don't give you. I mean, if you only give 2 penalties, that's only 2 chances they're allowing teams to either kick for poles or kick into your 22. That means that for those, and if you kick into the 22, then you only have 2 entries that they've got to work hard and keep you out. So yeah, I mean, it is something that. But again, you look at different stats. They're good at that, but they might be weak at something else. And we're probably good at this and weak at that. And that's all that happens. It becomes a bit of a chess game in that you just make sure that the things you can do well, you do well, and the things that they do well, you try and put them under pressure.
Just on that last 20 minutes, you mentioned last week about the leadership of the last week. Who was the vice captain when Ron went off? Who was the captain? Who took over as captain?
Ulrich. I think Ulrich. Just for a moment, I went blank. So I don't think who was on the field. Yeah, so Ulrich.
Was his arm or who it was? Yeah.
No, probably Ulrich. Ulrich would have been making the calls then. But what I would really like to get to is like tomorrow you have Ulrich and Ruan Nokia on the field, and they talk to each other all the time, and they get consensus to how they want to do things. And then when Nazam comes on, and if all 3 are on at the same time, then the 3 of them would be able to talk and see what they need to do. That, again, is what I was saying is, if Nazam's sitting there and he's got a great feel for how the game's unfolding, if he goes on and those two are on, there's nothing to stop him from giving his opinion based on what he's felt off the bench. That's what really good teams do, over time. If I look at the Springbok team of 2007, so John Smith was the captain. He was a young guy, 24, became the national captain. And then over time, Farid became a captain of the Bulls, Victor became a captain of the Bulls, Jean de Villiers became a captain of the Stormers, Jean Smith became a captain of Free State, Skalkberger became a captain of the Stormers. And then, then all of a sudden you have all these captains running around and they're all on the field and they all can sense what's needed. What I was really disappointed about is we got sucked into 37-10 to thinking we're going to win this game by 50 points. And we almost probably got seduced by the fact that, David Creel went through, offloaded. Yeah. If he'd held on to the ball, and those are the margins that we talk about. If he holds on the ball, we score. If that pass sticks and we score, then everyone claps and goes, well done. That's outstanding. So, unfortunately or fortunately, you got to take the good with the bad, and that's why I talk a lot about the first 60. What we've got to learn, coaches-wise, is what we're going to do in the last 20.
Last question. Last time we spoke on the B field there, you talked about JF van Heerden. Yeah. You were talking to him and he wasn't too keen on staying. You've signed him now for another 3 years. That's a big feather in your cap there in terms of keeping players in South Africa. How did you manage that? Yeah,
well, look, I'm very happy that he's decided. And I had funny enough, I had a chat to a guy at the Sharks the other day, and I said to him, do you guys not get frustrated about where we are with junior players? And what I mean by that, if you having to ask Jeff van Heerden and beg Jeff van Heerden, and I say that in a way where not again, please stay, you've got a future here, and it becomes, I'm not sure, there's a problem for me. There's a problem because 20 years ago, if you'd asked a Bulls player, Bierman van Zyl said in the old days, will he vir die bulle speel? That guy would have signed on the dotted line for the rest of his life. Now I understand dynamics change, but why have we lost that? So the answer to that question of the Sharks is, everyone's talking about Hooker, this 13 centre. And I don't know him well, but you can see he's a talented player. But who's going to stop him in 2 years' time from signing a contract with Harlequins and going to play with Tyron Green and with Marcus Smith, as an example? And that for me is a concern, because all the investment you put into all these youngsters, and then they just leave when they at almost the right age for them to pay back to the club that gave them that exposure, is something we're going to have to look at, because we can't have a mass exodus of 22, 23, 24-year-old players every cycle. I said it to you earlier as well, Simon. Corné Beets was voted the best junior rugby player in South Africa, and he's now 1 year after under 21s. He's going to Leicester. I can't think of any rugby playing nation or football playing nation. I'm talking about, yes, I know the soccer landscape is different, where they would let their star junior go and play somewhere else. And that is why. So we're very happy. Jeff's committed, and in the next 3 years, our job is to make sure he recommits for a longer period. And not just him, Cameron Hannekom, and the youngsters in our group, Wessels, Jan-Hendrik Wessels, and all the youngsters that are Kane and Moody and all that sort of thing. We don't want to be an academy for big clubs overseas. And I think that's why I keep, I suppose, banging on that drum, guys, because all that's going to happen is you get buying clubs and you get selling clubs, and we don't want to be a selling club. We don't want to be a club that sells all our best players to the big clubs so that they can play against us. So we're very happy. Jeff is committed. 3 years sounds like a long time, but when you've just turned 20, it's not a long time. It's 3 years when you're Nazam Kar is a long time, because you're in your 30s. But 3 years for a 20-year-old is not like you've signed your life away. And we got to try and find a way which the 23-year-old guy who will have 50 games and he would have been coached by us for 3 years stays another 3 to 4 years. So you actually get the best years of his career.
Thank you.